Ace Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Not Alone podcast. I'm Jason Moitoso.
And I'm Sam Fredrickson. And tonight we're going to be talking to you about Mount Nyangani, or as it's known by the local people, the mountain that swallows people.
Which is quite terrifying.
Not the best nickname to have earned for a tourist
I
destination.
mean, all I imagine is like this giant animal opening and closing its mouth when you try to walk on it. That's the first thing that comes to mind.
That is pretty much, I think, what they're
It's a
trying
giant
to convey
worm.
there. Yeah. It is a frightening image, and rightfully so.
But it's also astoundingly beautiful as well.
It's gorgeous, yeah. So let me tell you about the mountain first, before we get into the disappearances and the supernatural.
And the mermaids and the otters.
And the mermaids and the otters and the Nyangani river frog.
Also, a prey animal for the otter.
The otters. I will tell you, before we get really started here, Jason, I don't think he did any research that was not related to the African Clawless Otter.
Very minimal. I read
Very
things.
minimal.
And I like otters.
Okay, anyway.
Otters are adorable.
Otters are very
Plus,
cute.
they are also called the Groot otter.
Oh.
Which, of course I'm going to look into that.
You're the Guardians of the Galaxy fan. So let me tell you about the mountain first, and then we'll go from there. So Mount Nyangani is the highest peak in Zimbabwe. It reaches over 8,504 feet up into the air. It's home to stunning waterfalls, the African Clawless Otter, also known as the Groot Otter, and the Nyangani river frog, which
it's adorable.
It is adorable. We'll post pictures of it on Instagram. Now, it's located within the Nyanga National Park, which is a 182-mile area that encompasses most of the Nyanga district of Zimbabwe. The mountain is known to be a very sacred place to the locals who do not often traverse it. However, because of its height and the stunning natural beauty of the surrounding area, it is a favorite of tourists in the region.
Yeah, it's essentially smack dab in the middle of rainforest. It's very dense vegetation. That's what I'm getting at.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's simply beautiful. The ascent and descent to and from the peak takes normal people around 1 to 3 hours. It's not a serious rock climbing thing. You don't have to be trained. You can pretty much just hike it.
It's not a steep climb, that's for sure. It's essentially a plateaued mountain, to give you kind of an idea of what it looks like. And the mist essentially will kind of cover the top of it, which is it gives you, it's definitely a sense. Yeah.
The mists of Mount Nyangani are legendary in and of themselves. It can go from a bright,
we'll dive into
day
why in a moment.
To just a clouded, misty, can't see in front of your face. We'll dive into the actual mountain here in a moment, but it is worth noting that the Nyanga area is rich with folklore and legends regarding cryptids and spirits.
Oh yeah, especially I could absolutely see that in an area with such dense vegetation where the people are very connected
to the natural world.
Yeah.
Well, and it's the native local traditions and religion, the animism of it. It's still very well alive, and still very prevalent in the area. But not everything is just faith and belief and religion focused.
There are some weird things that go on the mountain.
Yes, well, and one of them, the weirdest one, apart from I think the disappearances, is actually in the same area. So it's not the mountain itself, but it's in the Nyanga region. It's the story of two dams, one in Osborne and one in Gokwe.
Their families just hated each other.
Rivals. Nope. The families of the dams. Oh, wow. We are taking...
I'm being pretty liberal with
a huge new level
with our storyline here.
Yes, that's all right. Basically, these two dams were vital and necessary to the surrounding area's water supply, and they desperately needed repairs. And so they said, okay, we're going to repair them. So the workers would go in, they'd install new pumps, they'd clean, they'd fix, and all of that. And in the morning, pumps...
Yeah, it wasn't work as usual.
Yeah. The pumps would no longer be functioning. And not only the pumps, but the equipment used to install them. Now, there was no evidence of vandalism, but they had used so many replacement parts that it wasn't just like, oh, we just got a bad part. We got a bad part. You know, it happened day after day after day. And about this time, when that probability of it just being a chance occurrence happening as that faded out, you started to get these strange stories from the workers. Now, the Zimbabwean Water Resources Minister, a man named Sam Sepepa Nkomo, he was called...
Bravo.
He was actually called before a parliamentary committee to explain vital repairs that needed to be done, and they were just being delayed and delayed. Now, he said that his workers were coming to their boss with stories of these beings, these humanoid creatures with very pale skin and long black hair and fishtails that came out of the water. And they would chase them, and they would harass them, and they would pursue them. And there were even reports of these mermaids, for lack of a better word, grabbing them and bringing them under the water and suffocating workers and keeping their bodies down there. And
that's not scary, not at all.
It is.
I like the old fashioned mermaids where they like sung to you, yeah, and drew you in instead of chasing you down. They're going after them, man.
Oh man, they are scary.
Yeah,
they are terrifying creatures.
And like the way you described it, first thing that came in my head was like a tadpole through like metamorphosis. What is?
Like it just stops halfway through. Yeah. There's no,
but it's
really
like into a full blown mermaid. It's like
there's no like biological.
They're teenage
incentive.
mermaids.
Yeah, there's no biological incentive for a mermaid to happen. Like it doesn't make any evolutionary sense. But
oh no, none whatsoever. I'll talk about that more in the next Jason special.
There we go. That's what his workers were reporting. So he says, he's testifying before the parliamentary committee. He says, okay, the folklore of the area is just too much for the native people.
Yeah, a lot of superstition. Mm-hmm. It gives thoughts in your mind. There's all if you know about what's going allegedly happens in this area, you'll start to see it.
Exactly. And this area has been known for spooky folklore and stories of mermaids from way long back. So that was what was on Sam Sepepa Nkomo's mind. And he says, okay, what we're going to do then, we're going to hire some people without these superstitions. So they outsourced the jobs. They brought in Caucasian workers from another area. And then these workers just come right back to him and they say, we are not working
There's
there.
Some freaky stuff going on.
He says, why? What? And they say, mermaids. There are mermaids in those waters. And he is just beside himself. But he hires divers to scout it out and to look around and see, okay, what is going on down here with the pipes? He doesn't even care about the mermaids. He says the mermaids aren't real. They're not there.
Right.
I just need to get a look at these pipes. So he hires divers. The divers are down for a few minutes and then they just bolt out of the water and run. And they don't even say what they saw. They just said, we are not going back in there.
It was probably a clawless otter.
I don't think that they would run from
the males. Get up to 5 feet in length, and they spend most of their time, you guessed it, in the water.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, the more you know.
The more you know about the clawless otter. That was beautiful, man.
Thank you. More to come.
Thank you. So they run away, and this finally, he says, okay, even if I don't believe in this, we need to do something about it. They consult the local tribespeople. The local tribespeople appease the mermaids with offerings of homebrewed beer. And after that event, the mermaids are gone. They are no more.
I just imagine like sitting around with the mermaids, cracking open a cold one.
Cracking open a cold one with the mermaids. Exactly. Now, so that just kind of gives you a reference to the spiritualism of the area, and it's just a really great story. Because mermaids, I really enjoy that story because mermaids are one of the ones that I don't believe in at all. Not since the Discovery Channel made that fake documentary about them that then convinced me about their existence. And then once I found out that was fake, I rebelled and said, of course they're fake. I'm an idiot.
That's what happened with me in the dragon documentary.
Oh, yeah, dude. Oh, I remember that.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, exactly. And
I wanted it so bad to be true.
I still believe in dragons in my
little
own
bit.
little way. Now, the mountain itself is said to be guarded by the spirits of the ancestors of the local people. It's not recommended to be traveled. And it's especially, they say, if you have to go up, you have to follow these laws.
Very particular rules. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's very interesting. And these are found in every single article that I found referenced the same laws, like a dozen articles. So the more well-known ones are things like don't engage in sexual activity. Don't relieve yourself on the mountain.
Don't wear red.
Don't wear red. Stuff
if you find a gold bar, don't pursue it.
Don't look at it.
That was the weirdest one to me.
I think the weirdest one was if you find a smoldering clay pot with no fire.
Yeah, that's weird as well.
Moving
that is strange.
That's the kind of.
But one actually logical one is if you find a colorful snake, don't pursue it as well.
Yes.
Which usually, when it comes to color, if an animal is colorful, it usually means it's probably venomous.
Yes.
So like that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
That one's
Leave it alone.
Yeah, that's good advice at any time.
Right. Now, the other one that's really weirdly specific, though, is that you should not complain about the weather.
Oh, and you can't curse.
You can't curse. You can't complain about the weather. You can't complain about any food taken from the mountain. So, for instance, if you grab a bunch of berries and they're bitter, you don't say, these are bitter berries, because that would break one of these tribal laws.
And also, the animals tend to apparently act weird.
Yes, yeah.
And if they do, also don't try to investigate.
No.
Apparently.
Ignore it.
Right.
Ignore all of it. That's the main focus of the rules, is like if anything is weird, don't think about it, don't talk about it, don't investigate it.
What do we know about the animals that do inhabit the mountain, Sam?
Why don't you take a moment to tell us about the African Clawless Otter?
Ah, the African Clawless Otter. A lonely animal.
God.
Only actually interacting with others of its species for mating reasons. Otherwise, it spends most of its days alone in the water or in the shade.
So it's kind of like you.
Being the heat. Sam, it's a lot like me. It will use stones and other tools to crack open freshwater crabs and clams, but will also dine on fish and frogs. Probably the most adorable thing is that, again, they don't have any claws. Besides for the 3 claws on the rear feet, which is really weird because it's the index.
The clawless otter.
I know. Their front paws, no claws. Back paws, 3 claws. Four toes, only 3 of them have claws. And guess what? It's the smallest 3. So I guess for digging, I'm not sure. But apparently they bimble around when walking on land, and they
don't have very good balance.
Yes, they are absolutely designed and well suited for life aquatic. Now they do also have this adorable patch of white fur over their face, and it continues down to their chest as well. Now, the cool thing about these otters is that you can actually find them in quite a few places. They are actually very, very common along the entire Congo River. So essentially, you can just kind of follow the Congo right across a lateral line across Africa, and then once you get to more of the eastern side of Africa and go straight down, there's another river system that they populate quite a bit. Mm-hmm. Also, that's all I got for now. Anyway, otters. They're amazing.
They are amazing. Thank you for that, Jason. So, thank you for that brief discussion on the African Clawless Otter.
Anytime, Sam.
Now,
anytime.
Local legends about strange occurrences have been taking place there since the beginning of time. There are reports of laughing or talking trees with human faces, especially on the top. There are reports of the blood of the river coming down from the mountain dropping or turning red at the drop of a hat. And I actually found an account from December 2014 in which a mysterious huge boulder rolled down the mountain and hit the stream. Now it hit the stream and immediately disappeared, and the river ran red like blood. And I've posted it on Twitter already. I'll post it on our Instagram as well. But this was the kind of weird stuff that would just happen and definitely led to superstitions. Now, when consulting the local tribes people, they explained that this had happened, this water had turned red, because the body of a murder victim was found in the area. The local tribesmen explained that it was the spirit of the ancestors showing their anger for the desecration of the area. And then the body was removed. They did some rites. The water went back to normal. When I posted it on Twitter, Chris from the Mad Scientist podcast commented and said, "Oh, there's a lot of iron in that river."
that's exactly what I was thinking.
He said a lot of iron, a lot of zinc, or a lot of weird algae. So
Chris, if you're listening to this, you're my hero.
There we go. There are definitely a lot of weird natural ways that the water can turn red, but it just adds to the mystique, the spookiness of the area. You know, you take the red rivers, you take the clouds, the mist descending, and you get this sacred, terrifying mountain. Now,
absolutely. If you don't know what's causing these events, then it comes down to, oh man,
there's something going on. Yeah.
Yeah. Something supernatural.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
But the real reason, beyond the mermaids and the rivers turning red and the mist, the real reason we're going to be talking about Mount Nyangani is because of the disappearances that have taken place on this sacred mountain. Now, the lore of Nyangani is obscure, even within the Nyanga area. It's well known that the mountain is sacred and that those above mentioned rules and regulations must be adhered to lest disaster strikes, but it's hard to get a good gauge on why and what makes it so cursed. You know, we're going to be talking about specifically, I think, 3 different cases, but both in the modern time and in time before that, there are dozens of disappearances and missing persons who just for no other reason than, you know, the mist or this or that just disappeared without a trace. So we got to try to find out why. Now, we were able to find one article from the Sunday Mail, which is a Zimbabwean publication. It was written by one Jida Mutinhima. Now, in the article...
Again, bravo.
Thank you.
Yep. Well done.
You hang tight here because I'm going to do a few more.
Perfect.
Now, in the article, Jida recollects their journey to trace the heritage of the mountain, and I do apologize for the names. I'm trying my best here. Now, the story goes that the Bantu people were moving from the north to settle in the area of Nyanga. Now, the Bantu were ruled by Makombe, who was the chieftain of their tribe, and Makombe's daughter was married to Muchachani of the Simbodi tribe, and was also known as a healer who possessed supernatural powers. Makombe feared Muchachani's powers and gave him part of the country as a kind of like a dowry to placate him upon his marriage to his daughter. Now, this part of the country includes the present-day Nyangi Mountain. But the mountain passed from Muchachani to his grandson Nahando, who was a powerful warrior. Nahando was betrayed by his friend while fighting in a battle and was killed, and his nephew stole his family's chieftainship. Now, one of the big things that we're going to go into here is the fact that spiritual mediums are still a very alive and well phenomena in this area. You have people whose entire day is just channeling this person or that person. You have people who are specifically kind of assigned or specifically communicate with just one spirit, or one that can do, you know, all sorts of different spirits and people there. So the writer consulted the medium who was able to channel the spirit of Nahando, and they were given this message.
When was Nahando's death?
I couldn't find the actual.
Okay, so we're not quite sure when all that occurred.
No, I think it's in a prehistoric kind of time. Before the tribes were just kind of wandering, before they had really settled down back in the hunter-gatherer
when we were
period.
still in a tribal society.
Yes, exactly. I believe. If you know anything to the contrary, let me know. But the writer consults this medium and was given this message by the spirit of Nahando. And he said, I am saddened by the story you are asking me about. I am saddened because my children don't have a place of their own. They are just refugees everywhere without a place they call their own. If you look closely, the water is drying up slowly. I won't rest until my children reclaim what is theirs. People will continue to disappear in Nyanga Mountain. And those disappearances are what we're going to be focusing on today. Now, while the mountain and its sacred status is indisputable from time immemorial, the modern-day events of Mount Nyangani start mainly in the 1980s, and it begins with the tragic disappearance of the 2 teenage daughters of a government official named Chichindepi Messiah. Now, the girls disappeared in 1981. You can imagine that if, the Secretary of State or the Department, Secretary of Energy, if their child went missing, you can imagine the kind of search that would entail. And it's very similar. They called in helicopters. There were huge numbers of on-foot volunteers to help the search. However, the family at no point consulted the local mystics. Now, the mystics, the tribes people, the spiritualists, they claimed that the girls were still alive and well. They claimed that they weren't dead, that they could be returned if certain offerings were given, if certain rites and rituals were performed. And they introduce into the story this idea, it's called Chimidza.
And it's kind of like an in-between world, right? It's kind of between planes.
Yes, well, Chimidza itself is the state of being that one person would be in. So it's like being in stasis. So the way that I think of it is like cryo sleep. You go into, your cryogenic chamber. You're not necessarily actually sleeping. Your body just has slowed down. You're not aging. You're
frozen.
Conscious. You're just frozen in time and space. So yeah, well, stasis. Not space, but time. And that's how I view it and what they're talking about. But there is other evidence that says it is more of a removal from this world and being held in a different one instead, sort of thing. Now, the family, like we said, didn't consult the local mystics. The girls, unfortunately, were never found. The Menyika people offered to help find the girls, but the parents had to consult the local mediums and the tribal people. Otherwise, they couldn't perform the rituals. They refused. No rituals were performed. And 26 years later, the girls have never been found, nor has there been any sort of evidence, any clothing, hair, anything that points to their final fate. And that's the first modern disappearance on Mount Nyangani.
Okay.
Now, just 5 years later, there's a young boy. His name is Robert Ackhurst. He's between 8 and 12 years old. I couldn't find a reliable,
exact age.
Yeah, a reliable age. And a big part of it is because unlike the disappearances of Njikuni Lake that we studied last week, I wasn't able to find these newspapers from before the digital age. We haven't preserved that area of the world's, newspaper history and all that, their press clippings and stuff. So right now it's all just secondhand accounts. But there is a young boy who went missing. He was on a class field trip. And again, big search. The local tribes people aren't consulted. The boy never comes back. And unfortunately, the next year...
Who takes 8-year-olds on a field trip onto a mountain that is claimed to swallow mountain. People?
Yeah, it's not just a normal...
I thought our education system was a little screwy.
Yeah, that's not a great situation to be in. Unfortunately, the next year, the teacher who had accompanied the class actually committed suicide due to their grief after due to their grief that they felt over letting Robert vanish. However, again, if you ask the locals, these people are not gone for good. They're just being held in Chimidza. the people, they'll enter this state by one of two means, basically. The first, an active and willful disobedience to the spirits, breaking those aforementioned laws. The second is that reportedly the mountain itself is sacred, but there are secret holy places on the mountain. And if you enter them, you are captured and held by the spirits. And consulting the local shamans and mystics is the only way to break the spell and to return the missing persons. However, regardless of the location, the circumstances, all of that, those first three aren't super paranormal. I hate to say it. You got 2 teenage girls and you got an 8-year-old boy, and they're hiking up a mountain that can get really misty.
Yeah, I'm sure we can find similar stories to that on almost any mountain that is traveled.
Exactly. So it's these next 3 that I really want to dig into here. Now, the first story that falls into this kind of more supernatural classification is that of a senior government official who went missing in the 80s around the same time as the young girls and Robert Ackhurst went missing. Now, the official and 2 friends were hiking the mountain and they simply disappeared. As you might imagine, if the Secretary of State himself went missing or the president went missing,
big search.
You'd have quite the search.
Yeah.
Even more of a search, I would say. You have people just scouring the mountain for 4 days, rotating out. There's always someone looking, and he just cannot be found. None of them can be found. They're checking the bottoms of cliffs. They're checking, the normal places for people to disappear, and they can't find anything.
Well, one of the problems with this mountain is that it's not that we don't have a lot of trails, and they're not well paved at all. They're all just normally walked on trails to make them trails. There's a lot of overgrowth.
In the time that you're talking about, that is correct. In the modern day, that's not correct.
As much. They've done a lot to improve it. And
right.
I'm sure there's probably more travelers now on that mountain than there was previously.
Right. But what you've got to remember is that if you ask the local people, we're going to get into this in a minute.
All right, fine.
Because we are.
I'll let you continue the story.
Okay.
And I'll I'll do my thing later on.
Yeah. Thank you. So, after 4 days with no sign of his body, his clothes, his companions, anything, suddenly he basically just reappears. He out of nowhere, and the searchers find him and they bring him back down, and they say, "Where are you? What happened?" And he says,
and this is the weird part. This is the part that for the lack of better information, I can't explain this.
Good.
Which makes me upset about this mountain.
Does. I know it does.
So,
that's what's supposed to happen. You should be upset.
How does he perceive what we saw as 4 days?
Right. So, and let me tell you really quick. The thing that brought him back was a blood sacrifice by one of the native tribes people. So, what he perceives and what he tells the rescuers who found him, he's a little confused. He doesn't really see what the big deal was. He understands that he had been missing, but in his time view, it had only been a few hours.
Time keeps on slipping.
You're thinking time slips.
This
is a little bit different.
A little, but yeah, his perception of time is vastly different than what the searchers, the rest of the world experienced.
Exactly. And this is confirmed by the 2 companions who went with him as well.
Maybe
they said
he shot into space and was traveling close to the speed of light to where he was perceiving time slower than the rest of the world.
Is that your theory?
Maybe that mountain is just a secret launch pad. Oh, I'm getting conspiracies going now. No, I don't think he traveled at the speed of light. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. You do you, son. Now, this is confirmed by his companions as well. In addition to it only feeling like a few hours, they also say, we didn't feel hungry, we didn't feel thirsty, we didn't feel fatigued. But the weirdest part of all of it is that the official states that he saw the people looking for him. He tried to reach the people looking for him, but he could not reach them. He shouted and waved his arms and made a big deal, but they didn't hear him or make any indication of hearing him.
And like he was in a ghost world.
Exactly. Now, we're going to get into that a little more in the end here when we talk about theories, but that to me is one of the strangest stories I've ever heard.
It's weird. It is absolutely weird. It's marvelous, and I can't explain it.
So the next story is that of Thomas Gaisford. Now, this is back in 2014. Thomas was a British student who had been awarded a grant to hike Mount Nyangani. It was called the Wallace Watson Award Lectures, and its objective is to help students find a greater ability and self-confidence in handling physical and mental adversity, and a better appreciation of other cultures and ways of life. Now, one of the biggest things about Thomas is that he was not an inexperienced hiker. He won this award because he was an experienced hiker, because he had been hiking many times. He was very good at it. He was a survivalist in his own way, and he understood what was going on. However, and it's good that he was, because it means he came prepared. As he's hiking the mountain, around 3 p.m., he gets to the very peak. And he's just hanging out for a minute. He's enjoying it. Suddenly, in the blink of an eye, the sunny, cloudless sky developed into just a dense, thick fog. And he was unable to see more than a few meters ahead of him. Now, he pitched a tent and decided to wait it out. Like I said, it's good that he was a survivalist because he brought food, he brought water, he brought a tent.
Yeah, he became disoriented from all the fog and decided that it was best just to sit put, which every time you get lost, it's always a good idea to sit put.
Please keep that in mind. One time I read The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon by Stephen King, and that is like pretty much, apart from like the monster chasing her through the woods, that's like the other good takeaway is just don't go wandering. Like,
yeah,
if you're wandering around, people aren't going to find you. But if you just stay in one place and yell every few minutes, someone is going to find you.
Right.
So,
I mean, it should be more common sense.
If you are listening to this and you are lost in the woods.
Yeah, if you ever get disoriented in the woods,
just sit down.
Sit where you are.
Now, if there's a bear coming at you,
well,
different story.
I mean,
sit in a tree.
Bears only really get, from my understanding, really aggressive in a couple different seasons. Hunting season,
okay.
Like if we're talking like the salmon runs, things like that.
Right.
Mating season,
right.
Protecting their young,
right.
Or if you startle them.
Okay.
So
if you're just sitting there, ideally you're not doing any of those.
Hopefully you're not doing any of those things.
But if you have to, maybe run away from that.
And I mean, most animals generally stay away from people.
Fair.
So if you are making a ruckus,
okay, but
while
here's the thing.
Maybe making a fire to do a smoke signal,
right,
at that same location where you got lost, you should be in a pretty good spot.
Correct. Here's the other thing, though. If you are lost in the forest right now, please turn off this podcast. You need to be aware of what's going on around you. You need to be listening for people calling your name.
Actually, I have more survival tips as we go. So you might want to stay tuned.
Okay, we can incorporate that into this. That's fine with me.
You're not alone. We're here.
We are here. But also turn off the podcast. Or skip through until you hear Jason's voice and then listen to a survival tips.
Hey, that's the way I listen to it.
Okay. So he gets blanketed in this thick fog, and he decides, okay, we're going to sit down, we're going to wait it out. Now, as soon as he was within his tent, a downpour started, and crazy hurricane status wind and rain was just pounding and pounding on his tent. He recalls sitting in the door of his tent and looking out into the fog. Now, as the rain began to abate, the mist was still there, and he began to be visited by various animals. He recalled being encircled by the beasts, whose features were indiscernible, but whose glowing red eyes shone through the fog.
It's probably now.
None of the creatures approached him other than the snakes. Now, the snakes would come up to him, and they would circle him and his tent.
It's cold outside.
Said, what?
It's cold outside. Snakes like heat. It's my only justification of why snakes would actively try to say hi to him. That's why
Hello.
You put rope around your sleeping bag. Snakes don't go over rope. Especially
Is
if
this
it's like
another survival tip?
Yeah, dude. Yeah. Always.
Any other you wanna fire off really quick?
No, I'm good. They'll come to me. But yeah, especially like a really rough rope. Snakes won't crawl over it. So if you're ever camping in an area that you know there's a lot of snakes, put a rope around your sleeping bag, and usually you're okay. And always put out your fire, because only you can prevent wildfires. What? Okay. Continue.
Thank you. So the snakes would approach him, and they'd circle him and his tent. And he would just stand still. He wouldn't move. He wouldn't make any noise. And the snakes never really tried to get into his stuff. They never really tried to even attack him. They just seemed to be watching him. And the same thing with the other beasts who he couldn't see, but he saw their eyes. They never came close enough for him to see them. They never really attacked. They were just kind of watching him. And he said he spent... Oh, really quick though. Now, the interesting thing about the snakes is that there is a specific piece of folklore. Jason mentioned it earlier, where if you see a colorful snake, it is best to just pretend like you did
Ignore
not.
it. Ignore everything.
They're said to be tricks,
all of it,
played by the spirits to entrap people.
Which I don't. Why would you ever?
I don't know.
Want to pursue a snake? I mean, anything for the shot, pictures.
For the Insta. Do it for the Insta.
Always for the Insta and the Snapchat, bro.
There you go.
Gotta snap it.
Now, he says that he spent the entire night sleeping and praying off and on for about 10 straight hours. In the morning, the fog had cleared. He hoofed it down the mountain, and he gets interviewed about his experience later, and he said, I heard a lot of strange stories about the mountain, but I never believed them. I tried to put that at the back of my mind, but I never consulted traditional leaders before I embarked on my expedition, but I later realized that I should have done that. I am happy to be alive. There is more to experience. I have a lot to learn about Zimbabwe and about myself. So even in that, he talks about it being something not natural, something supernatural. That's why he would, mention the local tribal leaders. But these are just two of the most popular accounts of people going missing and then returning. However, if you ask the local people in the area, they claim that dozens of more people have been lost and then stayed lost or were returned by the mountain than what is normally claimed. But because they're just normal local tribesmen, they weren't reported on. They're not the daughter of a finance minister. They're not a government official. They're not a British tourist. No one...
Yeah, they're just Joe Schmo over there getting lost on a mountaintop.
Yeah, no one cares about them. And the local people would say that there are dozens, if not hundreds of people who have gone missing on the mountain. Now, one of the most well-known and tragically still unresolved disappearances on the mountain is that of Zayed Dada, who he went missing from the mountain on January 4th, 2014. Now, his disappearance kind of factors into the previous one of Thomas Gaisford, who came back because the locals had specifically warned Gaisford against climbing the mountain due to Zayed's disappearance, which had been just a few weeks earlier. However, Gaisford went up, he had his experience, and Zayed, even though he had his own warnings of the area, he went up as well. Now, he was a Zimbabwean of Indian descent. He, his wife, and another couple had decided to hike the mountain. And the reports of the events leading up to the disappearance are a little conflicting. I found one account that states that his wife and the other couple made it with him to the foot of the mountain, and then they were like, we're going back. We got a nice little condo thing over here. We're going to go stay in that. And he went up alone. But the majority of sources that I found tell it a little bit different. They say, okay, we all make it up halfway up the mountain. At that point, the couple and Zayed's wife sit down to take a rest. Zayed says, okay, I'm going to go take a look around. I'm going to see what I can see. And he's gone only for about 30 minutes until the mist starts to roll in. The mist rolls in. They quickly and frantically look for him. They realize he can't be found. He's not responding. And they run back down the mountain. Now, as soon as they get back there, they alert the authorities. and a huge search happens. This one, though, didn't take place in 1980. This one took place in 2014. For one, it had some distinct advantages. For one thing, the Zimbabwean military actually got involved in this case. And they sent their troops all over the mountain. They sent helicopters and airplanes to do flybys almost continuously. And for another thing, they used 3D terrain mapping technology. They used satellite photography, and they used thermal cameras, heat sensing cameras. However, just like every other disappearance, and even though this had all been done within days, I found an article, he disappeared on the 4th. I found an article from the 8th that was talking about all these measures that had been implemented. Even within that 4 days, they couldn't find any remains. They couldn't find his clothes. They couldn't find his wallet. They couldn't find any evidence that he had been there at all, even using all of this advanced technology. And that, to me, is why Zaid is different. It's why he stands out as a disappearance, is because we have the capability. They even his family called in volunteers who had hiked those mountains. They called in South African mountaineers who all they did all day was climb mountains, and had them search, and not a single trace of Zaid or anything relating to him was found. Now, just like previous disappearances, the local mediums, the local tribal authorities say, we have to perform these rites and rituals. And after a little bit of time, after a few weeks, his family finally says, okay, yeah, let's do it. And the rites and rituals were performed, but as of yet, 3.5 years later, there's still no sign of Zaid. Now, his family stated in no uncertain terms that he wouldn't have faked his disappearance or faked his death. His face was shared through everyone throughout the region, both in Zimbabwe and in 1 or 2 neighboring countries that they went into, printed flyers in the local languages just in case he had wandered in there. They've made Facebook groups, they've been on the news, everything. And no one has seen this individual. No one has seen anyone matching his description. And on the mountain, no one's seen, any trace of him to this day.
Yeah, so my biggest takeaway from these stories that we've covered tonight is really that these are tragedies. Absolutely, these disappearances. There are a lot of things that I can't explain. I can't explain mermaids chasing down and killing people. I can't explain loss of time. Mm-hmm. But I do know that the mountain itself is extremely treacherous. Mm-hmm. That, and we have a mixture of different weather that is changing erratically, frequently. Mm-hmm. And most of these disappearances are people that are unskilled hikers and are unfamiliar with the area.
Right.
Now, and a lot of times, a lot of these trails, again, I mentioned it earlier, they were not upkept well. Right. And this also, it takes place in, again, a rainforest type environment. Vegetation overgrows extremely quickly.
Right.
So maintaining these paths is incredibly difficult to do. You'd have to, for the most part, almost pave them in order to keep them maintained and keep them there for any amount of time.
Right.
So what can absolutely happen is if you are unfamiliar with the area and you get off track a little bit, you can slip. The soil itself could be extremely slick. You can find yourself in a completely different area than what you were 3 minutes ago. Mm-hmm. And with the fog, again, it's extremely disorienting.
Right.
And even if you come up to a trail, you might not realize that it could just be a game trail, not a trail made by people.
Let me tell you something really quick.
Go for it.
And you can factor it back in. I should mention that this fog is electronic fog, as has made its appearance on multiple episodes now.
Which does freaky things.
It does freaky things. So that can help your case, hurt your case, whatever. But I realized I didn't put that in there.
I have not done enough looking into electrical fog in order to really bring it in. But that could explain.
For anybody who this is like their first episode, electronic fog is fog that descends Usually it's
And
over sea.
and it messes up with electronic devices.
Yeah, so your electronic devices, but also things, magnetic devices, your compasses, stuff like that.
Right. Electronic devices. Magnets are created by just electricity. That's
magnets.
Yeah, dude.
How do they work?
It's electrons, bro.
That is the worst explanation of anything I've ever heard.
Polarization of electrons in a substance. You can send electrical current around an object and it'll polarize it,
right,
and magnetize it.
I've seen something like that.
Exactly. So it's electrons. It's all Magneto can technically bend magnetic fields as well. That's how he works.
Right.
So he can create magnets as well.
But that doesn't explain how they work.
Anyway, so
witchcraft is how they work. Go ahead.
Anyway, so electronic fog could be to blame. I honestly think what it comes down to is just inexperience and not knowing, and not having a good enough idea of the area that you're in. And I think a lot of those disappearances can be factored into that. As far as not being seen with helicopters, satellites,
the
things like that.
helicopters are one thing because
this is extremely dense terrain. The only way they're gonna spot you in a helicopter if you're in a clearing,
right,
or on like a cliff edge,
right. But what about the thermal technology? Again, the heat seeking. It'll seek that heat, man.
I mean, that's fair, but you're going to be putting out a whole lot less heat if you're damp. And also, we still have the tree coverage, the shrubs, that all will lessen your heat signature for it to penetrate. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, dude, I hear you.
Yeah, so even if we're using infrared technology, and plus, how would we be able to disdain what is a person and what's a panther? If you want to go that route, like if you're picking up every heat signature,
right,
those will also be picked up. Yeah,
you check it out,
but you can't check out every large mammal heat signature that you find.
Maybe you can.
So what I'm chalking it down to is disorienting conditions on the mountain.
Okay.
Poor terrain.
Okay.
Dense vegetation.
Okay.
And just inexperienced hiking.
Even
Tom.
You don't talk bad about Tom.
I'm sure Tom did a lot of his own homework, but again, he didn't venture off into any weird areas, which is one, a good thing. And two, yes, he might be a very, very experienced hiker, but he's not experienced about hiking in Zimbabwe.
Right, but
which is a completely different terrain. It's a completely different animal than hiking in like the UK.
Here's the thing about Tom, and Tom is a great example for the other side of it here. Can I take over?
Yeah.
Have you said your piece?
I've said most things.
Okay.
I haven't talked about the shamans yet. I'm going to get there.
Okay. Oh, we got to talk about that in a second. Anyway, here's the thing about Tom's experience is Tom didn't get lost, so to speak. Tom did very well. He made it to the summit. The fog came in. He pitched a tent. The fog came out. He went back down. That's a totally good, experienced, normal hiking thing to do. But what's weird is especially his interactions with these animals. His interactions with these beasts, be them owls or panthers or even animals that are on the mountain naturally, and yet they're encircling him and they're studying him and they're looking at him, and these snakes are slithering in a circle around him. Like, Tom didn't get lost. He went missing, but he didn't necessarily get lost. He knew where he was at all times, and he was able to come back down. So between Tom's experience there as well as the government official back in the 80s, those are things that you can't chalk up to, inexperienced hiking or adverse weather conditions. Adverse weather conditions are not going to cause someone to exit this reality, which is another point I want to bring up. The African concept, especially in this area that I found, the African concept of the afterlife is very similar to the concept of, we've referenced it before, but the upside down from Stranger Things, which is just the same world except kind of flipped, kind of reversed. There's not as many people, there are scary monsters, there are, a real lack of light sources and stuff like that. That's been their belief for years and years and years. And it sounds like, especially with that government official, but potentially even with Tom, that's where they found themselves in, was this kind of flipped reality where he can see into this world and he can see the people searching for him, but he can't interact with them. I mean, that's such a trope of like those stupid movies that we used to make about people who died and didn't know they were a ghost until they went to school. You know what I'm talking about? And like, oh no, I'm dead. What do I do now? Like, that's such a trope. But he didn't die. He came back. And especially, we can say circumstances, we can say, timing and all of that. But especially because he came back after that offering had been made. And after they had done basically an animal sacrifice in order to get that cabinet minister back. So, like, for me, I will completely admit that, like, all of this is a tragedy, no matter what. All of it is really sad, especially with Zaid, because his family has still got no closure. Like, they still, for all they know, he might pop back up. Yeah,
this is a very fresh occurrence.
With the two girls, the two teenage girls, and the one 8 to 12-year-old boy, yeah, kids can wander off, kids can get lost, it's tragic. It's still weird that even after 20 years of people keeping an eye out for them, they haven't found it, but still, that could be an experience hiking. Zaid, even though his search was so comprehensive, even though he disappeared fairly quickly, like in a matter, I mean, yeah, it's a half hour, but it's a half hour through.
You can actually travel pretty far within a half hour time.
I hear you. The normal human moves at about 3 miles an hour, so he could, in theory, get to 1.5 miles, but he was also probably pretty pooped, so maybe like a mile is what I would say, especially on hiking terrain. I mean, it's one thing to walk a mile, it's another thing to hike a mile. But in any case, they were able to use like satellite technology of the mist coming in. They plotted every possible route. These trails did exist, and he had 3 other people with him who told them exactly, like, this is where we disappeared from, and this is the direction he went walking in. So, like, they could find, they had a pretty good ability to search the area. Like, it wasn't like, oh, he's somewhere on the mountain. They were like, okay, he's in this area, or this is where he was last seen,
Yeah.
So, and it could, even with all of that, he could also just be, unfortunately, a tragic disappearance. However, I mean, the people who came back. So, and there was one other story that I found that I couldn't find anything else because of, unfortunately, that lack of being able to find the old newspapers. But a lot of the articles I read would reference, the 2 girls, the cabinet minister, the boy, and then they mentioned a 5th German tourist who disappeared and then 4 days later reappeared in a nearby forest. So, like, and that was, I saw that a few times, but I couldn't find it, anything on him specifically. But the fact that the people who are coming back are telling these strange stories, like, that's something that can't be explained. That's something that gives Nyangani its mystery. And it's why I will never hike it, ever. Like, even if I'm a professional hiker.
I would totally hike it.
All right, dude. I'll stay at the chateau, and you go on your little
I'll go
adventure.
wear my red t-shirt up the mountain.
Now, one last thing to talk about is that there is actually one local chief who goes by the name of Hata. He claims that all of those disappeared are still living within the mountain in that state of Chimidza, in stasis. And as recently as January of this year, he claimed that he would coordinate with other local tribal chiefs, which is another point that they bring up. You have these different tribes performing different rites. And so if, in theory, you're angering the spirits that are appeased by this rite and not this rite, if you perform the other rite, it's the wrong rite. And then, you don't get back. But he claims that he will coordinate with the other local chiefs in order to release them, but their ceremony requires the use, he just says a beast, which I assume is a cow, a goat, and a chicken, and this costs about $500, which they can't afford. I don't have a way of getting in contact with them, but if you would like to, I'm sure we can find it. And it is. I mean, the mountain is a lot better these days. They have actual trails. They've put up cell towers. No one's allowed to hike alone anymore. You have to take a guide. And you actually can't go up the mountain if your cell phone battery isn't pretty much near fully charged when you get to the foot of it. So things are better there.
Yeah, and we haven't had really much disappearances since.
Yeah. Because
we've been taking those extra precautions. Now, for me, I do think they're in the mountain.
Right.
But not the same way.
Right.
I know this is going to be more morbid, but when we're talking about an area of high moisture,
right,
and warm,
right,
bodies don't last long.
They decompose, yeah,
very, very quickly. So I think that's one of the major contributing factors to the fact that people don't get found. Even bodies don't get found. Even clothing, things like that. It will break down rather quickly. That, and to be completely honest, I don't want to sound disrespectful, but as far as the shamans and mystics of this area, they're kind of in a win-win situation. I mean, if they perform the rites and no one shows back up, then, well, it was just not the spirit's will. Right. But if they do, then look at that. The shaman's a hero. So it's, again, I don't want to seem very disrespectful, but I don't think that will help.
All right.
I think improving technology, like they have been, improving the trails themselves, having the guides, I think that is really what's ultimately going to be saving more lives. And I think that's the right precaution to make.
Yeah, it is. You still just
don't touch snakes.
Still just write off the guy.
And as far as
going into the upside down, though.
Yeah, that's. I mean,
give me a theory on that.
I honestly think it was. So you can survive. What was it, a week without water?
Yeah, and like 3 weeks without food. I think.
Yeah, you can. So
it's another survival tip for you.
Yeah, I can't explain the different perception of time. I can't explain most of that.
Right.
But theoretically, he would have survived if he did experience, again, 4 days instead of 4 hours.
He totally still would have been fine, for sure. But
yeah, but I can't, we don't have the ability to talk to him. Yeah. We don't, I can't dig deeper than that. So it's saying believing his account.
So, just so you all know, I didn't actually say it. My theory is that they are trapped in a kind of a stasis, whether it's the traditional African otherworld, whether it's the upside down. I don't know if I believe it's something that they can come back from this long. I mean, this chief, Hada, he is claiming that everybody, like the girls from 1981, Robert Ackhurst from 1986.
I mean, and if he means everybody, he probably means the people that have been disappearing centuries before.
Everybody can come back. And I mean, if that happens, dope, cool. But I think that there's a time limit on these things. And I think it's probably run out either way. But I think that they probably, you hear about this super sacred place on this super sacred mountain. And if you go
get
into
that in
it,
your mind. I mean,
well, no, I'm not going for a rational explanation here.
Darn.
You hear about this, and then suddenly people who go there have angered the spirits, and they're captured, and they're sent to this other world where things are just like ours, but a little different. What if they're walking through a dimensional rift? Like, what if there is a point on this mountain where the multiverse just
meets
a little bit,
and
without even knowing, you just walk right through it.
I mean, that's one explanation. Another is like glitch in the Matrix.
Stop it. If you say a glitch in the Matrix one more time, I am kicking you off the show. You need different theories, man.
I told you my theory. Mine's the logical one.
I know.
Mine's the one that, we have experienced people that don't know exactly where they're going.
Right. All right.
And because of that, and because of the weather, it's easy to get lost. It's not difficult. And it is also easy to panic, make a misstep, and then have a really bad time.
Jaw feel. All right.
Also, as far as the animals go, that can change purely off of how much contact they have with people.
Right.
Also, typically animals are more active towards the twilight or evening or in darker scenarios, which probably that storm was. So they are going to be more active. You're going to see more of them, especially just like the otters. They're nocturnal creatures usually most of the time.
Right.
So taking the otters specifically, and also many other animals, they're more active in the darker times.
Right.
So, it could be a number of different things.
The otters could have eaten him alive.
Otters, bro.
Otters.
They wanted more than just fish tonight.
All right. And we did it. That's
sort of
Mount Nyangani.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest takeaways that I have is that
Jason.
when I am hiking, whenever you hike in a new area, find out more about where you are.
Right. That's also a good idea.
I think that's a great thing. Is to also, of course, just be smart about the way you hike. And then, just know the terrain that you're going to be hiking on. Especially, like, with this mountain, we go from dense vegetation to cliffside instantly.
Right.
So you have to keep your wits about you, especially if we're talking about low visibility conditions.
And if you have reached the end of the podcast and you are still stuck in the woods, sit down and take out your headphones because someone's looking for you and you need to be able to hear them call, okay?
Or
turn off your phone so
follow water. Water will always take you to civilization.
Yeah, but which way?
You go down the mountain, Sam. You go down.
It's not always like that simple.
It usually is.
All right.
It's usually pretty simple. Just watch out for the mermaids.
Watch out for them mermaids. All right, guys, that's Nyangani. We're going to run through this. Guys, we have 2 new sponsors.
Ooh.
Yep. We have Mark Dowdy.
Mark!
Woo!
Thank you, Mark.
If you'll remember from last week, designed our new audio theme, our theme song that we're using. And so double thank you, Mark. And then the second one is Justin Ham. Woo!
Justin!
Thank you, Justin. We got 2 new reviews this week. I'm just, like I said last week, regardless of how many we get, we're just going to start doing one per week. And this one is by Christoph Rabel, who he is actually a very interesting gentleman who I've talked to a few times. His name is Rob Christofferson. He is in and of himself a podcaster, and he's done like podcasts on like professional wrestling, and then he's done another one called like, what's it called? It's like something about Maddie Lives, or so he's the co-host of Turnbuckle Binge and Maddie in Progress. Turnbuckle Binge is the wrestling one and all of that. And then Maddie in Progress is him trying to help his buddy. However, he is an avid believer in the paranormal, and there is actually, if you're interested, our good friend Chris Cogswell of the Mad Scientist podcast actually just recorded like an 1.5 hour long interview with him where he talks about UFOs that he's seen, ghost experiences he's had, cryptids, the whole 9 yards. So go listen to that, but I love his review, and I'm going to read it here. It says, it's titled The Art of Being Not Alone. He said, I discovered this podcast through my friendship with Dr. Chris Cogswell of the Mad Scientist podcast. This is a fantastic, objective podcast delving into the weird. Sam and Jason have a great dynamic together, and you can hear that passion in every episode. I also love how interactive they are on social media. If you love podcasts like Astonishing Legends and the Mad Scientist podcast, check this one out, folks. They'll make you feel at home.
Aww.
Isn't that nice? I love that. So thank you, Rob. You're fantastic. Cool. Guys, we're making t-shirts.
Uh-oh.
We are making t-shirts.
Oh, dear.
Go follow us on Twitter and all of that, Facebook, Instagram, and we'll keep you up to date. I'm hoping to get orders and pre-orders open in the next 2 weeks or so. And
we should model them.
Well, here's the thing. I have to buy them before we can model them, and I don't have the money to buy them.
That's fair.
So,
all right.
Yeah. So
baby steps.
I don't have any in stock.
Reference.
What we're going to do is we're going to accept can't remember the exact order. It's like 30 to 50 pre-orders. And then if we get to 50, we'll order then. If not, we'll do it like 2 or 3 weeks from the day that we open pre-orders, regardless. Yeah, so cool.
Start repping us.
Rep up. Rep. I don't know what.
Show your support.
Rep it up. Cool. All right, guys, we are on Facebook at Not Alone Pod. We're on Instagram at Not Alone Pod. Instagram at Not Alone Podcast. We're on Twitter at Not Alone Pod. You can go to notalonepodcast.com and sign up for our newsletter, where you'll get a lot of news and letters. Jason, did you want to say something?
And just like I proved last week, if you just Google search for Not Alone Podcast, you'll see pretty much all of our stuff.
That is true.
So if you're not exactly sure where to find us, just Google it.
Yes. Oh, and really quick, I forgot to read it out. We're only reading one review, but we're still calling out the names of people who did a review.
Sam.
So thank you, Ice Fox Me, for your other great review. So notalonepodcast.com. You can reach out to us, notalonepodcast@gmail.com. We are everywhere, guys. I'm trying to think of a good...
even in your home.
I'm trying to think of a good podcast to tell others about here. Oh, I talked about The Mad Scientist.
Yeah.
So that's pretty good. Let me open up my podcasting app. Some people plan this stuff out. And they like sit down and they're like, oh, this episode, I'm going to talk about this podcast. I did that last week with Fairy Tales for Unwanted Children, which, in case you're wondering, he put out a new episode. It made me cry again. So if you haven't listened to that, please go listen to it. You know what? I've got one here. Okay, if you like our show, I guarantee you that you're going to love The Conspirators. So what The Conspirators is it is a one-man show by a gentleman who calls himself Nate Hale. I think I've mentioned it before because he left us a review, but essentially Nate focuses on the dark, the weird, the macabre is really the best description for it. He has an amazing voice. He has an amazing narrative quality. He has an amazing production value.
So if you could sum it up, what would you say this podcast is?
It's amazing.
All right, there it is.
He's done episodes on things like this time that there were these stowaways on this ship that unfortunately they got like beaten and tortured, and that was terrible. He has other ones about like these man-eating lions down in I think it's Savo.
Is that the two brother lions?
The maneless lions. Yeah. Yeah, Shadow and Darkness.
Those things
or
are
something
crazy.
Like that.
That's an awesome.
I think that was their names.
I wish my brother and I were named
I
that.
think it was like Ghost and the Darkness.
Ooh.
Yeah, those are dope names. He's got ones on
freaking supernatural.
Like he's got ones on like H.H. Holmes, America's first serial killer.
So a little bit more true crime as well.
Yeah, he does have a bit more true crime in it, which I know a lot of our listeners like.
True crime's fun.
He has one on a subject that we're going to be doing, Bella and the Witch Elm, which we'll do that in a long time. The one
eventually.
The one that I just listened to recently was The God Machine, which was this reverend who believed he was communicating with angels, and they taught him how to create and build what he called the Electric Messiah, which is the best band name I have ever heard.
That is also super dope. Wow, the end of this podcast is just sweet names.
Yeah. So, and it just details that. Guys, I'm terrible at telling people about things that I like because I get too excited. Go listen to The Conspirators. It's amazing. You're going to love it. All right.
I did it last week,
You
Sam.
did do it last week. I was about to say, I did it last week. Okay.
No, you didn't. Come on, Sam.
Get your act together.
You are a mess. Anyway,
and we're back. Remember, whether hiking up a cursed mountain or sitting in the forest, listening for your own name to come from beyond the trees, we are not alone.